Russian President Vladimir Putin declared that his country had annexed 4 regions of Ukraine. Within hours, Ukraine celebrated retaking several sections of the Russians' illegal occupation. And yesterday, the leaders of 9 European NATO nations issued a joint statement endorsing a path to NATO membership for Ukraine. They also called on all 30 NATO nations to boost military aid for the country under siege. So, what do these developments mean for Russia and Ukraine moving forward? Joining me now to discuss this, as well as his new campaign targeting wokeness in our military, is former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Secretary Pompeo, welcome back to the program.
Tony, it's great to be with you. I especially loved your word today.
Well, thank you. I want to get into your ad campaign because I think it is so needed as we see our military continuing to miss their recruiting goals. But I want to first get your thoughts on the latest developments in Ukraine with Russia.
Well, we're at a very dangerous moment for sure. The Ukrainians are making continued advances in the south and in the east, taking back some of the places that Vladimir Putin claimed were annexed, and which he asserted he wouldn't permit to be in any other than Russian sovereign hands. And he has raised the specter of using his tactical nuclear weapons to protect and defend that. I hope the administration has communicated very clearly, privately, to the Russians precisely what will be imposed upon them, what the cost will be if they should head down that path, and has made clear to them, too, that there is a path, a solution forward which can avoid that calamity. We have to both create diplomatic space but also be clear about our continued resolve to defend the Ukrainians, or allow the Ukrainians to defend themselves and provide them the tools to do so. If we do each of those two things, we can escape this moment in a way that will reflect the best of America.
I think it's important, as you said, a diplomatic solution here, because it appears to me that Putin is boxed in. I mean, he doesn't have many options at this point.
It's absolutely true. This has been an enormous failure, an unanticipated one, I'm sure. I'm sure his generals have let him down in deep and important ways. And now you can see they're having to call up conscripts, and there's a lot of Russians who don't want to go fight in this crazy war of aggression, this attack on Europe. So it requires both a solution, which is almost always the case. And I think Zelensky has said this will end in the form of a diplomatic outcome. But it needs to be made clear to Vladimir Putin that he can't use these nuclear tools. He can't act out in a way that would be inconsistent with that kind of resolution. There is a path forward. I'm hedging my words because I want to give the Biden administration all the space to go create the outcome, but make no mistake about it. We were too slow. We didn't deter Vladimir Putin. We now find ourselves in this incredibly difficult and dangerous place.
Yeah. What is enlightening, though, is we now know that Russia had nothing behind all of Putin's bravado. His military easily rolled over by Ukraine. Quite amazing. You know, you and I both served during the Cold War period when Russia was really the big dog, the one that we were most concerned about. But now we see that they're not there. He's lost a lot of credibility, almost all credibility.
No, it's very true. Both the stuff we could see, their inability to move forces on the ground, their inability to capture the air, take control of the airspace, and their ability to conduct cyber operations in ways that I would have thought that they could. No, they have clearly been diminished in their own eyes and in the eyes of the world. And I think Vladimir Putin now is trying to figure out how do you maintain some space, some respect, when it is still the case that he deeply believes that the dissolution of the Soviet Union was a deep wrong to the Russian people and wants to rectify that.
Yeah. Well, of course, we've got to keep our eye on China, which I think is a greater threat. And, of course, we have Iran, which you've spoken out quite frequently about. And we could talk about those. But I want to get into, I think, an underlying issue, and that is the readiness of our nation's military, how it is being weakened by this wokeness that's being thrust onto our military. This is of a great concern to you as a West Point grad, as a Army officer. And by the way, I like the commercial because you have the Marine Corps monument behind you there in the commercial.
Equal opportunity. I love them all. I am not Army specific. Look, this is a real risk. Tony, you know this as someone who's a great patriot. This is the military is an important American institution, wholly apart from its role to fight and defend our wars. If we undermine it by examples, right, by the things they're teaching kids at the Air Force Academy, that you can't use the words mom or dad or terrorist, by putting diversity, equity, and inclusion training well ahead of the capacity to actually fly your aircraft, drive your ship, or shoot your M1 tank. Those are cultural heritage losses that are really hard to get back for an institution that has always been a pillar where merit would be rewarded, where it didn't matter the color of your skin. None of that made a darn, right? We wanted to find the best soldiers, the best sailors, the best airmen, and now we've put this gender ideology, this anti-racist campaign in front of our soldiers. It will not only undermine our military's capabilities today, but as you suggested, young kids who are thinking about going to the recruiter station and say, take me, who want to just fight and serve, are going to be much less likely to want to do so.
Well, when you combine all of this together, when you've got these vaccine mandates, which are now proving to be ineffective at best and harmful in some cases to men and women in that age category, then this wokeness, this ideology that's being thrust upon them, essentially to hate a country they want you to protect, I mean, it's showing up, I think, in the numbers. Again, the Army 15% short in their recruiting numbers. That's on top of the end of last year. So, I mean, what do they see as the way forward here?
Look, I think it is an attempt by the progressive left to undermine one more central institution, right? They came for our universities, they came for our schools, our K-12 schools. They're doing it in our churches and our synagogues. You've seen that too, Tony. You've talked about it on your show a whole lot. The increasing secularization of America. I think this is just another place that they're coming after the Judeo-Christian heritage of our country. I'm so mindful of something President Biden told a group of Marines at the very beginning of his time. He said, the most important thing you'll do during your time in service is work on climate change. And it's just indicative of the fact that these young people who join our military do so to actually deliver, to fly their planes, to deliver good outcomes and fight our wars. They're happy to work on climate change in their spare time, but it is not why someone joins the United States military. And if we lose sight of that, if we forget the central thesis of what our military is designed to do and impose, whether it's the mandates or this ideology on these young people, we'll lose the bubble. And our Army, our military, our Marines will lose its capacity to wage and win our wars as well.
Well, in the ad that you have recently launched, you mentioned the pronouns. I mean, back during the month of June, when China was launching a new aircraft carrier, the Navy was launching an ad campaign teaching sailors how to use the proper pronouns. I mean, this is stuff that you would see, you would think you'd see on Saturday Night Live, but this is actually what our military is focused on, completely oblivious to the threats that exist out there in a very dangerous world.
I saw it, Tony, firsthand, not only in that ad, which is, you're right, it is almost self-parody, but I saw it in my time in service as a Secretary of State and the CI director to these social justice warriors that are inside the gates, that are inside our bureaucracies, that are working to undermine these institutions and their traditional. There's classic, the heritage of these institutions are truly at risk of taking down these important organizations. And we can't let that happen. That's why I'm engaged in this fight. It's why we've asked people to tell us their stories, their experiences. We've had over 200 people already send us some of the most harrowing stories you can imagine about what they experienced in their time in service. And we'll repost some of those online. It's important that we call this out. It's important that our senior military leaders don't permit this to happen. And it is even more important that our senior political leaders make sure that our military is not infected in this way.
Final question for you, Mike. How can people get you their story? Where do they need to go?
The best place to go is to cavpack.com. That's Charlie Alpha Victor, Papa Alpha Charlie, cavpack.com. Go there. There's a place to go see what others have said, what ads we put online that talk about this and why it matters, and post their own story and tell the American people why it is this matters so much to them as well.
And this is the final question as we're up against a break. Can we reverse this?
Yes, of course. You know we can, Tony. It'll take hard work. It'll take determination. It'll take a little bit of time. But good leaders and prayer often can solve things that seem insurmountable.
All right. Well, we're going to talk more about that in the days ahead. Mike Pompeo, great to have you on.
Thank you, Tony.